Billionaire COS shocking moment. 3 unexpected words from a black maid transformed everything. Ethan Richards sat stiffly in his leather chair, the glossy surfaces of his multi-million-dollar office reflecting the endless hustle of Silicon Valley. Outside, the sun-drenched city pulsed with life, yet inside the walls felt like a cage, the clatter of keyboards and hushed tones of his employees mixing with the weight of his own thoughts. He twisted the heavy ring on his finger, a token of status, but today it felt like a shackle, anchoring him to a world that demanded more and more. His recent quarterly metrics were dismal, and the impending backlash from investors loomed over him like a guillotine. In the back of his mind, something small began to fester. He was no longer the untouchable tycoon, the relentless visionary. Instead, he was just a man lost among profit sheets and whiteboards cluttered with dollar signs. His phone buzzed incessantly with notifications and demands from board members. Ethan let out a slow breath, feeling the tension in his chest tighten as he thought about upcoming presentations. It came down to this: really money versus humanity, an increasingly hollow existence versus tangible impact. Before he could spiral any deeper into his regret, Clara, the maid with a sharp wit and infectious laugh, walked in to dust the shelves lined with sleek awards and shimmering accolades. In her presence, the room shifted slightly. She caught his eye for a moment, her dark gaze assessing him with a depth that felt both unnerving and refreshing. Clara was just a maid, yet she possessed a wisdom born of necessity, an insight he had long abandoned in the pursuit of wealth. Each day she tidied his estate, an opulent facade holding back the derelict truth of his spirit, and he only saw her as another cog in his well-oiled machine. Yet today was different. As she fluffed the cushions of his immaculate couch, she paused, turning to him with unexpected confidence. "You are enough," she said, her voice steady and clear. Those 3 words echoed in the sterile office, resonating through the air like a pulse. Instantly, the relentless ambition that had propelled him forward began to crumble. A spark of guilt flickered within him, gnawing at the base of his integrity. Was he enough? Or had he allowed his identity to be consumed by wealth and status, forgetting the core of what truly mattered? He noticed Clara's expression, compassionate yet unwavering, and felt a pang of anguish. Doubt crept in, a fear that if he embraced her truth, he would be labeled a failure in the eyes of his peers. Every utterance of sincerity within this world felt like a suicide note to his reputation. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Yet, the turmoil within him only escalated. He wanted to challenge the status quo, to revise the ethos of his company in a way that prioritized employee well-being over cutthroat profits. But as he planned his revolution, he was met with skepticism and condescension. During board meetings, his ideas were scoffed at, undermined by colleagues who thrived on traditional measures of success. Every face in the room wore a mask of incredulity when he brought up compassion and responsibility. One colleague in particular, sharp and disdainful, planted seeds of doubt in his mind with words dripping with derision. The mounting pressure felt almost unbearable, and in moments of self-reflection, he wondered if Clara's wisdom was a mirage on the horizon, drawing him in but ultimately leaving him stranded. Ethan found himself at a crossroads. He could cling to the safety of the familiar, continue polishing the same gilded path that left him hollow, or he could risk it all, venture into a realm where humanity transcended profit, a choice fueled by Clara's simple yet profound revelation. But what if he faltered? What if he lost everything? The stakes felt impossibly high, and the specter of failure loomed larger than any corporate crisis he had ever faced. The gala approached, where he would reveal his vision. The theater was set, but would the truth that Clara ignited within him push him into uncharted territory, or ensnare him in a life of disbelief? As he paced, the realization struck him. This was not just business anymore. This was survival of his legacy, of his spirit. Ethan awoke the next morning, the events of yesterday swirling in his mind like a chaotic storm. Clara's words echoed in his consciousness, as did the doubts clawing at his resolve. "You are enough." The phrase lingered, taunting him, daring him to confront the reality he had built over years of relentless ambition. He glanced at his reflection in the mirror, a facade of success staring back, but beneath it lay a vulnerability he had long buried. As he prepared for the day ahead, a sense of urgency enveloped him. He needed to find clarity before the upcoming board meeting. He had all the data at his fingertips: metrics, projections, shareholder expectations, but now he recognized they weren't enough. He craved a different kind of strategy, one not framed by financial charts but by the human experience. The drive to the office felt longer than usual. Every stoplight became a stark reminder of the choices he faced. In a world fixated on profits, was he willing to push for a future where employees felt valued? Or would he succumb to the familiar dread of dissent from his peers? Each passing moment intensified his internal conflict, pushing him closer to a decision he had been avoiding. Arriving at the office, the usual buzz around him, once filled with promise, now felt oppressive. His colleagues chatted animatedly, unaware of the tumult brewing within their CEO. Ethan settled at his desk, his mind racing through potential approaches to present his ideas: the values of empathy and social responsibility. He wanted to incorporate mental health initiatives, employee assistance programs, and even redefine what success looked like for his company. But then doubt struck again. Would his board even entertain these ideas? The memory of condescending glares and dismissive laughter from earlier meetings reminded him of the tenuous balance he was walking. He had always been the stalwart leader, the one with the right answers who thrived on aggressive growth strategies. Now, he was redefining his leadership from being profit-driven to people-centered. As he stared at his computer screen, an email notification popped up. It was from one of his board members, a meeting notification laden with analysis of the quarterly performance. His heart raced, adrenaline coursing through him. Was this the moment when he could turn the tide? Reject ignorance, embrace vulnerability, and redefine success? The meeting commenced, and as he sat in the boardroom surrounded by corporate titans, he felt an unexpected thrill. This was his chance. He cleared his throat, and words began to spill, first articulating the figures, and then seamlessly weaving in the story behind the numbers. He shared insights from employees who felt unappreciated, their voices strangled by corporate machinery. He talked about creating a work environment that inspired, fostered loyalty, and recognized the value of every individual, not just the financials they generated. Faces around the table turned stony. Some were pensive, others incredulous. Ethan noticed the sharp, disdainful gaze of his fiercest critic, David Hargrove, who raised an eyebrow, readying a counteroffensive. It struck Ethan that he was indeed challenging a paradigm, one that could define his professional life. However, he pressed on, unveiling the prospect of a compassionate company ethos as a possibility that would resonate beyond immediate profit margins. Yet, a lingering trepidation shackled him to the podium. What if this was a miscalculation? It could backfire. He could alienate even the most understanding of his peers. Would he be willing to sacrifice his position for a shot at instilling purpose in his work? At that moment, a memory of Clara's steady eyes breached his thoughts, those 3 words igniting a new sense of courage. Success is not a destination, but the fulfillment of our potential, he claimed, his voice steadier now. Around the table, some began to nod, while others shifted uncomfortably, caught between their long-held beliefs and the burgeoning revolution he advocated. As tension buzzed through the air, he remained oblivious to David's invitation to interject, fully consumed by the narrative he was crafting. The moment felt transformative. He had sparked a conversation that could reshape not just his company, but himself as a leader. Just as momentum seemed to build, he sensed a quickening heartbeat beneath the table, an atmosphere ripe with potential clash. The time had come to face the consequences of his daring shift. Would they rally around him or try to rein him in? Clara's affirmation loomed in his mind. All he could do was trust that perhaps, just perhaps, they could be inspired to embark on this journey with him. The boardroom held its breath, eager to hear how he would respond to David's imminent challenge, unaware that everything was about to change. Ethan steeled himself, glancing momentarily at the board members surrounding him. Each individual bore expressions ranging from curiosity to defiance. He swallowed hard, sensing David's palpable hostility. It was now or never. David, he began, addressing his opponent with deliberate calm, I understand that this concept might seem unorthodox, but I urge you to consider the broader impact on our organization. The success we've achieved has come at a cost: high turnover, burnout, and disengaged employees. At time we had a real conversation about the long-term sustainability of our growth. Ethan felt the air thicken with disbelief. A few board members appeared unsettled, while others exchanged skeptical glances. Yet, amid the uncertainty, a thread of determination unfurled within him. Why had he waited so long to address the human aspect of success? He was ready to advocate for an unprecedented shift, yet he still questioned whether his resolve would hold against the storm of opposition he anticipated. David interjected, his voice dripping with condescension. And what precisely do you propose we do? Hand out participation trophies? This isn't a schoolyard, Ethan. Businesses are built on performance. Performance is important, but it shouldn't overshadow fundamental human dignity, Ethan countered. The words felt foreign yet liberating. To get the most out of our employees, we need to create an environment where they feel valued and heard. Our retention will improve, and with it so will our bottom line. As he spoke, he caught David's dismissive smirk and felt a tremor of anxiety. This wasn't just a business strategy anymore. It was a direct challenge to the old ways of thinking. He recalled the glimmers of hope he'd seen in employees as Clara had helped him see their burden of far greater responsibility weighed on him now. Perhaps you're right, Ethan, but let us not forget that shareholders won't be swayed by lofty ideals, David replied, crossing his arms. The contempt in his tone was unmistakable. That's precisely what I mean, Ethan pressed on, sensing the floor shifting beneath their feet. When we foster a culture that prioritizes well-being, we enhance productivity, creativity, and retention. Employees won't leave, they'll invest their hearts into their work. We need to redefine success not just in numbers but in lives impacted. A chorus of muffled murmurs rippled through the room. It surprised him, the curiosity mingling with skepticism. For years, his voice had been one that echoed the desires of a profit-driven ethos, but now it trembled with a new cadence. He could feel the winds of change rustling against the suffocating walls of the boardroom. Yet a pulse of fear rushed through him. Was he prepared for the backlash? What if this bold presentation incited rebellion? He realized he had little choice but to push forward regardless of the fallout. Consider this a pivotal moment, gentlemen, he continued, to transform not just our business model but also the very nature of our leadership. The world has changed. We must evolve or be left behind. I know this is ambitious, perhaps even naive, but what if we dared to believe in something greater? David's expression tightened. You're risking everything, Ethan. Your position, your credibility on a sentiment. Ethan's heart thundered. The stakes were immense, but so too was the pressure he felt to realize a vision he never fully understood until now. Had he miscalculated? The weight of this gamble loomed over him, but Clara's words echoed through him once more. He would rather face uncertainty than retreat into silence. As the silence stretched taut across the room, he caught the eye of one board member, Annabelle, who seemed intrigued. Was there an opening? Ethan inhaled deeply, feeling the collective attention weighing down on him. Let us embrace the chaos. Let us be the leaders who choose empathy over indifference. Join me in redefining success not as a number, but as a culture that inspires our employees. The moment hung in the air, pulsating with potential while fraught with danger. What would be the consequences of his outcry? Would he emerge a pariah or a champion? As the reality of his plea settled, David seemed poised to retaliate, his expression hardening. Ethan braced himself for the impending confrontation, aware that the very foundation of his leadership was at stake. Would he rise from this clash, or would he fall beneath the weight of traditional expectations? The air crackled with anticipation, revealing that his battle was just beginning, and the next words could either fortify his resolve or shatter it entirely. Ethan's heart raced as he scanned the room, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. David's contempt hung heavy over the boardroom like an ominous cloud. This was no longer about strategic miscalculations or financial targets. This was about challenging a culture that had reigned for far too long. He felt himself teetering on the edge of a precipice. Ethan, David began, his voice laced with hostility, you speak of empathy, but what does that even mean within the parameters of business? Are we to simply coddle our employees? This is a serious company, and we simply can't afford such whims. Ethan clenched his fists under the table, fighting the instinct to retreat. It means understanding our employees as whole people. He shot back, the words escaping without hesitation. When we offer support, we're not just being kind. We're ensuring the integrity and sustainability of our operation. Isn't that the very definition of a serious company? Some board members leaned forward, intrigue flickering in their eyes, while others remained entrenched in their doubt. Ethan absorbed their responses, knowing he had shifted the conversation. Yet the shadow of David's skepticism loomed larger, and doubt wormed its way into his mind. Was he really prepared to go toe-to-toe with someone so entrenched in the status quo? Let us entertain this notion for a moment, David replied, his expression inscrutable. What is this grand plan of yours? We make concessions for emotional well-being at the cost of our profits? Ethan lifted his chin, determined to stand firm. The data supports my argument. Organizations prioritizing employee well-being report higher levels of productivity and innovation. Consider Google or Microsoft, they invest in their people and it shows. Silence enveloped the room again, this time edged with contemplation. It felt like a victory, a tentatively uncharted territory where dynamics could shift in unexpected ways. He searched for Annabelle's gaze once more. If he could win over just one ally, it could catalyze a broader change. Yet David was relentless. That's the problem with examples like that. They are the exception, not the rule. It's nice for them, but can our company run with those ideals? Ethan narrowed his focus, forcing himself to confront the discomfort in David's words. Unease stepped in. But this was an epiphany. The real challenge awaited him in a confrontation with himself. He had to admit there was a sliver of truth in David's words. Not every organization could pivot so easily. Perhaps not every company, Ethan conceded, his voice gathering strength. But we are not every company. We can be pioneers. It's time we stop playing small, merely reacting to market forces, and instead drive change ourselves. As he spoke, he felt the static charge in the room giving way to a spark of something new. Could he inspire revolution? Could he embrace a future where empathy was not a liability, but a key to unlocking potential? David's irritation morphed into focused calculation. What are you suggesting as the next steps? A new policy, perhaps? Transformation starts at the top. I propose we begin with ourselves. It's about leadership accountability and stepping into roles that allow growth. We need to reevaluate our practices and seek employee input, creating a true dialogue. This is where we start. In those moments, a clarity began to coat his thoughts. He was not only defending a theory but defending a vision for something far beyond themselves. Each word he spoke instilled more conviction, and the collective empathy of the board members transformed into a highly charged questioning of the status quo. But uncertainty lingered under the surface. A thought nagged at him: could he effect real change? Or was he merely a voice crying out in the wilderness? As David arched an eyebrow, weighing the implications of Ethan's proposal, the tension came to a head. The board members, whether intrigued or cynical, now faced a decision that rested on the balance of their understanding of potential. Ethan sensed the pivot, the precarious moment where he could either solidify a network of support or draw ire. Would they falter in fear or take a step into the unknown? The air crackled with restless energy as he braced for David's response, knowing it could either seal his fate or ignite a new chapter of leadership. The moment stretched taut, and Ethan fought to keep his composure, eyeing the confrontation ahead. His heart thundered as David's lips curled into a smirk. The next word could shift the balance irreparably. What lay ahead was a confrontation not just with David, but with the very assumptions that had shackled him. The question loomed: was he strong enough to challenge the fortress of tradition? Ethan held his breath, feeling the weight of every gaze in the room fixated on him. David leaned back in his chair, a slight condescension woven into his expression. Start with ourselves? He echoed, sending a ripple of laughter through a few board members. And here I thought we were running a company, not a self-help seminar. The laughter caught Ethan off guard. Doubt flickered dangerously at the edges of his confidence. However, he realized this was not a time for hesitation. It was an opportunity to confront the very culture he sought to change. Ironically, it's precisely because we're a company that we must prioritize the people within it, he countered, his voice gaining a steadiness that calmed his fraying nerves. What do you think happens when employees feel undervalued? He pressed. They disengage, they leave, and we lose talent. Talent that could bring fresh ideas and innovation. We cannot afford to ignore this reality. David scrutinized him, eyebrows knitting together in calculation. What a charming idealism, Ethan. But let us be real. Most employees are just here for a paycheck. They aren't an investment. They're a cost. With every dismissive tone, Ethan felt the simmering frustration mount. He honestly questioned David's perspective. How could someone wield such influence while completely disregarding the well-being of those around him? But this was about more than just their disagreement. It was about taking control of the narrative of his own leadership journey. Maybe that speaks to how far removed you are from the front lines, he said, voice steadying. What if you spent a day working alongside them? You might discover that they crave more than just a paycheck. They want to feel like they're part of something worthwhile. For a fleeting second, the atmosphere shifted. A few members of the board caught each other's gaze, intrigued by the challenge. He sensed a crack had formed in David's fortress, and he had to press that advantage. Let me ask you this, Ethan continued, how do you envision the company in 5 years if we stay stagnant? What legacy do we leave? Will it be one of innovation, or just another corporation fizzing out in an increasingly competitive market? Ethan watched David, searching for a crack in the steely facade. But his expression remained composed, as if unmoved by the very points that could resonate with others. He internally chided himself. That was the problem, wasn't it? He was too focused on David's skepticism rather than harnessing the curiosity blooming in the eyes of his peers. Suddenly a thought crystallized. He would not just present an argument, he would visualize the transformation he felt in his gut. Imagine a company where morale is high and innovation flows. Core values authentically mirrored in daily operations, where feedback isn't just collected but acted upon. That will attract the best talent, allowing us to rise above the competition. He lost himself for a moment in the vision bubbling forth. His voice gained fervor as he elaborated, carrying the weight of possibility toward his audience. What if we implemented regular employee check-ins, supported career development with mentorship programs, or even trained leadership to embody these values? The tangible results could be remarkable. He glanced around the room, gauging reactions, and for the first time, he saw nods of agreement among some board members. Annabelle's gaze locked onto his, her expression radiating support. They might be ready for this change, ready to challenge the stunted complacency that had characterized their past. David's expression hardened, but a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. You make it sound easy, Ethan. This isn't just about nice ideas. It's about results. Ethan pressed further, sensing the decisive moment. Exactly. The results are tied to the ideas. This isn't merely a shift in policy. It's a paradigm shift in leadership. Embracing this change can push us towards sustainable growth, but we need to be bold enough to take that leap together. David's grip on the armrest tightened and silence fell like a heavy curtain. Ethan's heart raced as he prepared for the possible counterattack. Could he maintain the momentum? Or would he crumble in the face of David's relentless opposition? As he awaited the next move, a looming question filled his mind. Was he ready for the consequence of reopening old wounds within the board? This confrontation was only the beginning, and the real test might just lie in what lay ahead. The moment when he had to stand firm against the pushback from leaders who were resistant to change. Would he have the resilience to see through his vision no matter the price? Ethan felt a tense silence enveloping the boardroom, the gravity of his words hanging in the air. David's eyes narrowed, assessing him with a calculating gaze. This was not just about ideas anymore. This was a confrontation that could reshape Ethan's trajectory within the company. As he stood there, poised yet vulnerable, he felt an internal dialogue racing through his mind. What if he faltered now? What if all of this was for nothing? He dismissed the doubts, forcing himself to focus on the flicker of hope he had ignited. This was no longer about mere policy proposals. It was about establishing a new cultural ethos. Ethan, David spoke with a predatory calm. Reality dictates we cannot just change things overnight. Growth has to be strategic, measured. You're talking about ideals, I'm talking about profit margins. A ripple of tension coursed through Ethan's veins. And what's your plan, David? To squeeze profit from disenchanted employees? High turnover costs us far more than investing in our people ever would. He shot back, shocking himself with the fierceness of his rebuttal. He could see the camaraderie of his colleagues shift in his favor, encouraging a shared rebellion against the status quo. The seeds of doubt had sown dissent, and he sensed a collective yearning for change rippling through the room. Let us not forget, David continued, a sharp edge to his tone, we operate in an extremely competitive market. We can't afford to experiment with wishy-washy ideals that don't translate into tangible outcomes. Ethan took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. He realized that David's view represented an old-school mentality that limited not just the growth of the company, but his own growth as a leader. Then let us define what tangible looks like, he proposed boldly. Tangible is healthier workplaces leading to increased productivity. It's deeper employee engagement resulting in innovative solutions. I'm asking us to reevaluate our benchmarks. The shift in energy was palpable. A few heads nodded, making him feel emboldened. For the first time it appeared he wasn't just fighting alone. Annabelle leaned slightly forward, her keen gaze suggesting that she saw the big picture he presented. What do you propose then? A charade of happy faces? David retorted, leaning forward. Not a charade, Ethan replied firmly, but a genuine shift in our approach. Let us invest time in training leaders to foster a more inclusive environment. Let us reinstate feedback loops to inform policy, and genuinely listen to our people. If we don't, we'll lose talent to competitors who do. As he spoke, Ethan felt the shift within himself. Uncertainty, once a debilitating weight, began to morph into conviction. He had not just stepped up. He was transforming before their eyes. The desire to redefine leadership into something that encouraged authenticity rather than just profitability blossomed within him. But as conviction filled him, a deeper fear emerged. Ethan realized the risk wasn't only from David's pushback. It lay in the potential pushback from others who were content with the previous status quo. Would his colleagues support him during the inevitable backlash? Are you truly willing to push this forward no matter what it costs? David's voice cut through his reflection. Because you may find that this board isn't quite as receptive to your vision as you think. Ethan's heart hammered furiously. Did he have the fortitude to press on, even if it alienated him from the powerful figures in the room? Could he endure the personal and professional ramifications of his choices? His determination ignited. We have to be willing to take that risk. Isn't that what leadership demands? To create a company we can be proud of? His voice resonated, not just as a challenge but as an invitation for his peers to join him in this crucial journey. As the board sat in contemplation, Ethan caught a glimpse of the repercussions his vision might have. Alliances forged, battles fought, and even an uncertain future. The stakes had never been higher. This was not just a proposal, it was the beginning of a revolution. Yet, beneath the weight of hope and possibility lurked a chilling realization. What if the transformative journey was more perilous than he anticipated? Would his convictions hold when faced with the undeniable reality of entrenched power? The echo of his question spiraled into the silence of the room, leaving him racing with anticipation. The tide was turning, but the next storm might erupt from the very heart of his ambition. As he caught David's steely gaze once more, it was clear. Whatever awaited him next, he would have to confront it head-on. Ethan could feel the heaviness of the boardroom settle deeper into his chest. The silence that followed his bold declaration hung like a storm cloud overhead. He scanned the faces. Annabelle's expression suggested she might join him, but David's impenetrable gaze remained fixed, like a predator stalking its prey. In that moment, Ethan had an epiphany. He wasn't just battling for a policy change. He was vying for the very soul of the organization. The air throbbed with the uncertainties of 1,000 possibilities and thousands of lurking challenges. The stakes had transformed into questions of integrity, leadership, and morality. Could he carry this vision forward against the tides of quiet resistance? The very notion sent tremors through his resolve. However, each heartbeat thrummed with the promise of change. Let us take a vote, Annabelle finally interjected, her voice slicing through the tension. I think we're all tired of maintaining the status quo. Her words ignited a flicker of hope within Ethan. If she would take a stand, perhaps others would too. David's lip curled slightly. Are we really going to make decisions based on idealism instead of evidence-based strategies? Sometimes Annabelle shot back, getting in touch with our people's reality can yield more than just numbers on a spreadsheet. We're not just running a business, we're managing lives. The room began to shift, small murmurs threading through colleagues. It was a turning. It was evidence of the change Ethan had envisioned, oppressing the fear simmering in his chest. All right, I see your point, David answered, his voice somewhat calm, but the fire simmered behind his eyes. We can take a vote, but know this. If you lose, you put your credibility on the line. With the challenge laid bare, the risk of withdrawal slipped into Ethan's mind. His credibility was fragile. It could break under pressure. But the thought of retreating seemed absurd after what he'd begun. No longer could he tether his identity to just being an employee, climbing the corporate ladder. He could be a leader, a trailblazer who could redefine what success looked like, not just for profits but for people. Ethan swallowed back the swell of emotion and nodded, steeling himself for whatever was to come. They organized a silent vote. Each colleague scribbled their choice, which could tip the scales towards a new culture, or seal the fate of old practices. As the votes tallied, the air crackled with responsibility, amplifying the gravity of the moment. When Annabelle began to announce the results, time slowed and Ethan's heart raced. He closed his eyes briefly, imagining what this new trajectory would mean, not just for him, but for every employee craving recognition and investment in their future. 5 in favor, 3 against. Her voice carried an urgency. Ethan held his breath as the numbers were read. The final count leaned in their direction. It's official, she declared. We pursue better engagement strategies. Something that values our people. A wave of relief washed over him, crashing into a realization of the long road that lay ahead. But just as hope surged, Ethan noticed a cloud pass over David's face. The losing side would not go quietly. The aftermath of the vote sparked a mix of celebration and apprehension. Ethan was greeted with pats on the back, yet the satisfaction felt hollow. Victory came with its own demons. His colleagues had supported him, but what about the inevitable backlash? The price of leadership. In this moment of triumph hung the potential for conflict. Would David retaliate? How deep were the loyalty threads connecting their coworkers? As the boardroom buzzed with tentative excitement, an unsettling reminder pierced through the noise. This was but the first step of many. The challenge had shifted to execution, to tangible change, and to manage the fallout of defiance against the established order. In the days to come, Ethan would face not only David's ire, but also navigate sea storms within the company culture, unforeseen challenges that would test his leadership tenfold. It became clear. The fight had only just begun, and the path would demand far more than he had ever anticipated. He steeled himself for the anticipated war against inertia and status quo, aware that the next confrontation would be imminent. Little did he know, the most significant battle would not be against David, but rather against the doubts and fears lurking inside him, waiting to jeopardize the very ideals he aimed to elevate. What horrors awaited? Would Ethan emerge as a true leader willing to craft a legacy? Or would he be crushed by the weight of expectations and skepticism? The forthcoming clash loomed, inching closer with every breath. Ethan walked into the office the following day with a fierce determination, but the weight of the previous day's victory felt like a double-edged sword. The excitement that had bubbled within him had now crystallized into a fortified resolve. Yet beneath the surface lay the chaos of uncertainty. He could feel David's presence lurking, an unannounced shadow moving through the corridors. Ethan's plan for engagement initiatives to uplift the employees now seemed daunting, and the imagined resentment simmering from the other camp brought anxiety creeping in. As he settled into his chair, he flipped open his laptop and began drafting a plan. The vision of a corporate culture that valued human connection instead of mere numbers felt tantalizingly close. Yet the execution was a labyrinth of conflicts within and outside him. He pored over research studies, employee feedback, and industry best practices. As Ethan aligned the new strategies with the company's mission, his thoughts drifted to the reactions he would face. Were they ready for this? Ethan. Annabelle's voice cut through his concentration, and he looked up to see her standing at his office doorway, her expression one of both excitement and concern. I wanted to talk about the workshop series you were planning. I think it's crucial we start working on communication and trust. Can we brainstorm some ideas? Absolutely, he replied, neutralizing his unease with enthusiasm. Yet, the truth lingered. How could he rally the team when fear gnawed at him from the inside? As they strategized, brainstorming became a dance of inspiration and doubt. Annabelle's vision was bright and vibrant, painting a picture of a workplace where every employee felt heard. But with each suggestion, Ethan hesitated, the specter of David's disdain weighing heavily on his psyche. Would they even let him lead this transformation? Later that afternoon, as he stepped out for lunch, he caught sight of David in a heated discussion with a few colleagues. Their body language exuded a blend of resignation and rebellion, churning in the pot of fragile loyalties. Ethan's gut twisted. He couldn't allow himself to be swept into that tide of dissent. Ethan chose a different route, one that led to a small cafe around the corner where he could think, breathe, and plan. Alone at a table, he sipped his coffee and focused inward. This was his moment, not to shrink back but to cultivate resilience, to articulate not just the what of change, but the why, the human stories behind the numbers he had stared at just days prior. As clarity settled in, he envisioned how a series of town hall meetings could foster open dialogue, allowing employees to voice their concerns directly to leadership. The idea ignited a fire within him. It was a pathway to initiate not only a change but a cultural shift that could curtail the whispers of unrest. He returned to the office invigorated with purpose. Standing at the front of the conference room, he laid out his vision. These weren't just policies, they were lifelines. He articulated how each initiative would bridge the gap between management and employees, emphasizing empathy over authority. David's eyes narrowed in skepticism. Why should we invest time and feelings when we have targets to hit? He thrust, a reminder that the battle for change was just beginning. Ethan felt a rush of adrenaline, because understanding feelings is our greatest asset. Happy employees lead to better productivity. We can't afford to measure success solely in profits anymore. Our culture needs to reflect that belief. The tension in the room expanded, as his colleagues weighed the stakes and whispers floated around. Ethan noticed the shift in body language. Some heads nodded, alongside eyes of contemplation. Was he gaining ground? The moment stretched, and he sensed a new chapter of leadership opening. But then David shot him a look that promised retaliatory strikes. The brewing storm might just be shifting toward him. He gathered his breath, adrenaline pounding in his ears, testing his strength against skepticism was only the beginning. The true test, he realized, would be transforming this vision into a reality, siding against the comfortable inertia that had long dictated the organization's rhythm. What strategies would he employ to win over David and naysayers within the team? Suddenly, up ahead, the path to leadership interminably twisted, revealing a horizon veiled in potential strife. Would Ethan muster the courage to face the rising tide of opposition? There was no telling how deep the conflict would run, nor how much further he'd have to dig within himself to stake his claim on true leadership. Ethan awoke the next morning to a torrent of thoughts swirling in his mind, each one a reminder of the confrontation that lay ahead. Though the coffee machine in his kitchen hummed its familiar tune, he felt like a stranger to its comfort. Today was about proving himself not just to David but to the entire organization. He was no longer merely riding the tide of change. He had to navigate uncharted waters and steer his colleagues toward a new dawn. As he entered the office, the atmosphere buzzed with tension. He could sense his colleagues whispering, their eyes flitting toward the conference room where the town hall meeting would take place later that morning. Ethan swallowed his anxiety and forced himself to maintain composure. He wasn't just advocating for a shift in corporate culture. He was staking his own claim to leadership. He retreated momentarily to his office, reviewing his notes with laser-like focus. Each bullet point represented not just an idea but a lifeline, a promise of stability in the chaos that David had produced and perpetuated. He reminded himself of the stories he had gathered from employees voicing their struggles through anonymous feedback. Those voices didn't belong to numbers on a spreadsheet. They were human experiences, and he had to give them a platform. Yet, as Ethan flipped through his notes, a nagging doubt crept in. Would his efforts be enough? What if he stumbled in front of David and the entire team? He felt the looming shadow of David's cynicism inching closer, a reminder that skepticism could easily undermine even the most valiant efforts. Taking a deep breath, he steadied himself. The town hall wasn't merely a presentation, it was a dialogue. He would position himself not only as a leader but as a facilitator of change, a man who could inspire without being domineering. As he entered the conference room, the faces around the table greeted him, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Ethan took a moment to absorb the energy in the room before stepping forward. David sat in the back, arms crossed, an impenetrable wall of resistance. But beneath that hard exterior, Ethan sensed something else: fear of losing control, fear of change. "Thank you all for being here," Ethan began, projecting confidence despite the flutter in his stomach. "Today, I want to talk about how we can change our workplace culture to ensure everyone feels like they belong." Almost immediately, David interjected, "You really believe people care about feelings more than their jobs?" Ethan's heart raced, but he would not let this derail him. "Yes, I do. Because when people feel valued, they perform better. It's a chain reaction. Ignoring that connection harms not just morale but our bottom line." With every counter he made, Ethan could feel the tide shifting ever so slightly. He glanced around the room, noticing some heads nodding, their curiosity piqued. The nerves that had threatened to overwhelm him were tempered by a growing sense of purpose. His passion became infectious. It was no longer just about challenges, but about the potential rewards that lay ahead. He flowed into personal anecdotes from employees, recounting stories that illustrated the power of dialogue. Each tale engaged the audience, painting a vivid picture that numbers alone could not. It was as if the words flowed from him effortlessly, igniting a collective energy. Imagine a workplace where feedback can shape our strategies and trust is built through open conversations, rather than mere compliance, he declared. Imagine morale lifting not because of hollow incentives, but because each of us feels seen and heard. Ethan could almost taste the shift in atmosphere, palpable and alive. David's brow furrowed, but now there was a flicker of uncertainty there too. The room buzzed with whispers, and for the first time, Ethan felt the simmering resistance begin to give way to curiosity and hope. Yet, as he closed his presentation, David's skepticism returned like a sudden storm cloud. "This 1T work. You're idealistic, Ethan. We don't have time for this touchy-feely nonsense." The dismissal was harsh, yet it steeled Ethan's resolve. The conversation was far from over, and Ethan understood that winning over David would take more than just one meeting. It would require a persistent push against the prevailing winds of dismissal. Still, for every minute that passed, Ethan felt increasingly confident that maybe he had tapped into something deeper within himself. Direct confrontation with David was a necessary step, but so was cultivating alliances throughout the organization. He knew he had a long road ahead, figuratively standing on the edge of a precipice. As Ethan stepped back from the conference table, his heart raced but his spirit was unyielding. He understood now that change would come not just through plans and policies, but through nurturing those who would foster that change within themselves. The true test would come soon: how to unlock the barriers David had erected, and convince him to see the benefits of a culture rooted in connection. Just then a thought struck him. What if the key lay in David's own experiences? What if he could turn that confrontation into collaboration? A new idea ignited within him, one that might unveil strengths he hadn't yet recognized in himself but would be pivotal in this battle. What if he could draw David into an open conversation, rather than a closed confrontation? As he moved forward, the path ahead twisted unpredictably, revealing the complexity of human dynamics in the workplace. Would Ethan find the insight he needed to turn adversaries into allies, or would he falter amid the fray of corporate tensions? The stakes felt higher than ever as he browsed the terrain of leadership with a pulse quickened by anticipation. Ethan stood at the precipice, gazing into the unknown depths of an uncertain future. The past few weeks had felt like an emotional roller coaster, filled with triumphant highs and plummeting lows. He had set the foundation for a culture shift within his company, ignited by Clara's words and reinforced by his colleagues' interest. Yet, David continued to loom like a dark cloud, ever ready to rain on his parade. It was time to transform these tensions into opportunities. The town hall meeting had ignited a flame in Ethan, but now it was up to him to keep it burning. Drawing on his insights, he recognized the necessity of an organized and deliberate approach. His thoughts crystallized into a plan. He would invite David to engage in a one-on-one discussion, breaking down barriers and finding common ground. It was no longer about defending his initiatives, It was about understanding where David's doubts arose and addressing them head-on. That afternoon, Ethan sent David an invitation to meet for coffee, a simple gesture aimed at fostering dialogue. As he awaited David's response, he reflected on the complexities of leadership. The capacity to sway hearts and minds required not just eloquence, but genuine interest in others' perspectives. If he could understand David's fears, he might illuminate the path forward, not just for himself, but for the entire organization. When David agreed, Ethan felt a rush of both excitement and apprehension. They met in a cozy cafe down the street, an environment far removed from the sterile confines of the boardroom. With soft music playing in the background, Ethan tried to empathize with his counterpart, shifting the atmosphere from corporate tension to genuine conversation. As they settled into their seats, Ethan took a breath. "I appreciate you coming here today, David. I'd like to understand where your reservations come from." David leaned back, arms crossed defensively. "Ethan, I'm not against innovation or change. I just believe we can't afford to lead with emotion. Our focus must remain on the bottom line." Ethan absorbed David's words, searching for a way to connect. "I understand that, but what if I told you that studies show that companies that prioritize their employees' well-being report higher profits? Wouldn't you want to explore that possibility?" David furrowed his brow, and Ethan could see the gears turning in the back of his mind. This was progress. "What could that look like, though?" David asked. Ethan seized the moment, recalling an article he had read about companies integrating employee feedback to drive engagement. He skillfully painted a picture of a workplace where employees felt valued, motivating them to invest their energy into their roles. "For example, we could conduct regular surveys to identify issues and provide solutions. Recognizing contributions from all levels would foster a sense of belonging," Ethan explained. Michael, our project manager, mentioned that team collaboration could be enhanced if each member felt their voice mattered. Imagine the innovation that could emerge from that? David remained silent for a moment, contemplating. Ethan could see that the wheels were turning, that perhaps David could envision a different way forward, challenged by the very notion he held dear. "You have data on this?" David queried, lifting his gaze with newfound interest. "Absolutely," Ethan affirmed. He pulled out a few printed studies he had brought along and slid them across the table. "The data underscores that an engaged workforce leads to reduced turnover and higher productivity. We can leverage this during our next pitch to investors." As Ethan elaborated on the statistics, he caught glimpses of intrigue mixed with skepticism in David's expression. It was as if a small crack had formed in David's steadfast wall. "Fine, but just because it works for them doesn't mean it will work for us," David retorted, unable to completely mask his reservations. Yet, Ethan sensed the opening being created. This was more than passive listening. David was responding. "True, but what if we adapt these models to our culture? Change would take time and courage from all of us, but with deliberate efforts we can build something with purpose. Don't we owe it to ourselves to try?" An internal shift rippled through the conversation. Over the next hour, they ventured deeper into dialogue, exchanging ideas, personal anecdotes, and occasional laughter. David revealed glimpses of his own struggles. Leading a profit-driven company often left little room for vulnerability and introspection, an admission that softened Ethan's heart toward him. "Let us not forget," Ethan said, drawing from Clara's wisdom. "We are enough. We can tackle profit and humanity simultaneously. They aren't mutually exclusive, David. We have a chance to redefine success." As their conversation drew to a close, Ethan felt an overwhelming sense of clarity. He had entered that cafe with the aim of changing David's mind. Yet somewhere along the way they had both evolved. By the time they stood to leave, the air buzzed with unspoken possibilities. David's once stoic demeanor seemed tinged with a spark, as if he was willing to entertain the notion of a dual-focused approach. They had reached an understanding, a cooperative partnership that could propel their company forward. As Ethan stepped outside, pride coursed through him. He had not only navigated the waves of personal conflict, daring to challenge the norm, but he also transformed his individual approach to leadership. He had proven to himself that authentic communication could conquer long-held beliefs and reshape dynamics, not just in the boardroom, but within himself. The next phase of his journey lay ahead. He had successfully turned skeptics into allies, proving that Ethan Richards, was more than a billionaire CEO. He was a leader who could affect change, challenge expectations, and inspire a path toward a more human-centric philosophy of success. And in that pivotal moment he realized, true leadership began with understanding, followed by action. With newfound recognition for his competencies, he was ready to embark on implementing the changes that would not only build a better company, but align perfectly with his vision of success that embraced humanity, empathy, and enterprise. Ethan could finally breathe. His vision was no longer a solitary pursuit. As the sun set behind him, he knew it was time to rise, to advance into this uncharted territory, ready to embrace the essence of true leadership and foster a company culture that valued every heartbeat within its walls. It was only the beginning. Now, if you found Ethan's journey inspiring, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. It truly makes a difference. Share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think about Ethan's transformative journey? And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your engagement fuels these powerful narratives, and together, we can spread stories of resilience and overcoming.